Welcome to Inspiring Women with Laurie McGraw. I am your host, Laurie McGraw. I have spent the past 30 years in leadership, and over the years, I've come to learn one thing: women need women, and not just any women, but inspiring women. Tune in every week to hear from women at the pinnacle of their careers and from others who are just starting out. Episodes can be found at inspiringwomen.show or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Thanks for listening, and I hope you will be inspired. This is Inspiring Women, and I am Laurie McGraw. Today, I am speaking with Michaela Griggs. Michaela is the CEO of Southern California Reproductive Center. She's also a board director at Gordian Health Sciences. She has over 20 years of being an experienced executive at either pharmaceutical, health and wellness, and beauty organizations. She, as a leader, has led many organizations to success. And today, we're going to talk about her newest role at Southern California Reproductive Center. And Michaela, thank you so much for being on Inspiring Women.
It's my absolute pleasure. I'm really honored to be here.
Well, great. Well, Michaela, you know, 20 years and you've been in many different parts of the healthcare spectrum. I'd like to talk just right now, like what is your day-to-day? This is where we always start Inspiring Women for women like you, so accomplished. You know, what does today look like for you?
Today is very different from yesterday, and it'll be very different from tomorrow. That's kind of, I think, what most leaders would say. So as you mentioned, I am the CEO of Southern California Reproductive Center, which is a pretty large infertility clinic here in Southern California. We're a multi-centered clinic, so I actually have clinics outside of Beverly Hills. Our main headquarters is in Beverly Hills, and then we have centers that are also in Santa Barbara, Pasadena, and a couple of other cities here in the Southern California area. And it's amazing. You know, I come in every day knowing that I am working with some of the best physicians that are in their industry and in their field, and that we are helping people create the dream of having a family when they can't have a family. So we do, you know, we're working on fertility preservation for younger women, as well as infertility issues for couples that want to have a family that can't have a family, whether they are traditional couples, LGBTQ plus couples, and just about everything in between. So it's incredibly inspiring to come to work every day. But my role is very much administrative. I am working and managing how the operations work. So it's very operational, and allowing the physicians to have the freedom to do what they need to do to look after their patients. So a lot of what I do every day is thinking about how we operate in order to optimize patient safety, patient experience, in order to make sure the patients achieve their objectives, but also managing staff and making sure that we have the right staff and right staff infrastructure for the multi-center locations. And in today's world with COVID and with so much nursing shortage, that can be really, really challenging. It's a high turnover of staff. There's a lot of burnout. Our patient growth has been, you know, quite incredible, and keeping up with that growth and still servicing at the highest quality standards is a day-to-day challenge. I've got amazing management staff around me in the clinical. I've got a great director of nursing that is absolutely fabulous, but we also have an IVF lab. So we have lab people as well as clinical people. And we also have a surgery center. So making sure we have the right staff for each of those support functions or parts of our business, and making sure the right staff and we're doing the right things. We're here basically 24/7, 365 days a year. We're always open. I think there's only 4 days a year that we're closed, because you can't always know when a female cycle starts or ends. So we need to be there to capture the right time in that cycle in order to produce children. It's a very hands-on organization. I actually come to the office just about every day. So having the right sort of safety protocols and making sure that, we're protecting ourselves, but still being in person and being able to see patients in person, and also manage the increase in telemedicine is a very unique challenge. I've been here since the middle of 2020, so joined right in the heart of when
in the middle of the pandemic. And, so Michaela, the fertility space, it seems to be somewhat exploding a bit right now. There are so many new innovations in that area, all different sides of fertility. But I do want to talk more about that because in addition to leading the organization, you also have investors, and that's just a whole different level of how to operate at different levels of scale. You're bringing innovation to the organization, and I want to talk more about that. But I also want to talk about a bit of your background, because before you did this, you've led many different organizations in the wellness, beauty, apparel, and health, different areas. So maybe if you could just give us some backdrop before you were CEO of this particular organization, some of the steps along the way in your professional journey.
Yeah, happy to. I do have a slightly unusual and unconventional journey to get to where I am in the clinical practice world. So I'm not classically out of practice management, and this is actually the first service/clinic that I've run. But you're right, I've run a lot of large businesses. I actually started in the National Health Service in England and in clinical practice, and always thought that I wanted to go into practice management of some sort. And somebody gave me a very wise advice that I should probably experience business from the pharmaceutical side, as they would be customers, clients, and there would be a very important symbiotic relationship. So I thought I would join a pharmaceutical company for a very small amount of time. My goal was 6 months to a year. I joined a company called Bayer.
Small company.
A very small company in the sales organization, and very much found my home. And 20 years later, I was running their worldwide aspirin business for them. So I grew up in a lot of ways in a very big blue chip pharmaceutical company, German company, that then got transferred to the States. So I started in sales management, sales training, then moved into marketing to do marketing for, I actually switched a product over the counter from prescription in the UK, and then followed that brand into the consumer division, which at that time was a fledgling division in the mid-90s. And then, was earmarked to go onto a management track. And in these large companies, you often have to do an international assignment. And I was rather cheeky and sort of was like, I don't want to do Europe. I had lived in Germany multiple times and felt that if the consumer products area was a big growth area, that having experience in the United States would be a really good thing for me. And I was cheeky enough to actually make that suggestion, and the organization liked the business case I put forward, and I got the opportunity to interview in the States and was accepted. Needed to take a little step back from a grade standpoint, but that was fine for me to get the experience, and came out to the States and had a really great run at Bayer Healthcare. Got promoted quite quickly to brand manager, and then to a director of a business group. Really reformulated and brought new strategies to the One A Day brand, which helped that take a really different growth trajectory. And from there, they promoted me to go on to their flagship business, Bayer Aspirin, at a local US level and then global level. And then through some business restaging that I recommended, that job of moved back to Germany, and I was moved into the diabetes organization, which was devices. And so that really rounded me out from having some pharmaceutical experience, some direct to consumer experience, and the device part of the healthcare business. So
Well, it sounds like you've got there's some purpose in some of these shifts. So purpose of having international experience, purpose in terms of, seeing multiple sides of the business. I have to imagine, running Bayer Aspirin globally required a level of, understanding safety protocols and things of that nature. But you use the word cheeky. I'm imagining that cheeky was important to you in some of these career progression steps. What does cheeky mean? What's a cheeky story that you could share with us?
So I think that for women, it's sometimes hard for us to raise our hand and to, it's a very English term, meaning that you're basically asking or stepping out of the norm. So, I've experienced this in my career. I've done it myself where, it's the good girl syndrome. Work really hard, make sure that, I really perform, and everyone will notice that I'm a good employee and good things will come to me. Well, every now and then you have to step outside of that box and maybe ask for what you think is right for you in your career. But it's a hard thing to do. And I think doing it in the right way, and I use that term cheeky, meaning that I have stepped outside of the box and asked for something. But what I've learned is to ask for it in such a way that it's about the good of the overall business versus just the good for me. I really do love large, thorny problems, and I'm willing to volunteer to take on businesses that are either a little bit challenged or need a different perspective. And I would say that what I've learned along the way is to find the right way to say that I'm the right candidate for that role, or to raise my hand to ask for something. So, for example, that international assignment, when people were indicating to me that I may have the potential to do more in the organization, and being a large multinational, that an international assignment would be probably in the cards and would need to be considered. I knew that I'm not great at languages, and I also knew that the traditional way in Europe to get a European to have international experience was to stay within Europe and work in France or Germany or Spain, which is the large, outside of the UK, as other large centers. They weren't going to be the best for me. And I was also in a business that I knew was really important to the organization, a business group that was important to the organization. And so it was very obvious to me that if Bayer Consumer Care in the UK really wanted to grow and be exponentially better, then they needed to have employees that were learning from the best at consumer marketing, and marketing that was relevant to the UK market. So it became a very easy dialogue to have with leadership at that time to say, I know you're asking me and you're suggesting that this should be in my future, but had we ever considered this path? Because this path would actually not only benefit me in my growth, as you've already articulated you want me to have, but it would benefit the organization better, because the learnings of marketing for direct to consumer is a closer parallel from the UK to the US than it is to Germany, because the regulatory environment is different in Germany.
And Michaela, I think that story is such a great one, because I think you're right. And I hear from so many women about, having the confidence to ask for it, but you're suggesting, bringing, prepared information and thoughtful discussion in terms of how that your ask is only in the better interest for the organization that you're with. But have you ever had the experience where you made the ask and it didn't go your way? Because another thing that I hear from so many women and have experienced myself is that sometimes those setbacks, they sort of like you get in your own way. They become like new barriers. Have you ever experienced, where it didn't go the way you wanted to? And then if so, how did you overcome that?
Yes, I have experienced that. I think we've all experienced it at some time. And I think it's really important not to let it negatively affect you. And for a while it does. You get depressed, you get sad, but trying to just pick yourself up and make the best of it, I think is one way of trying to overcome. So the situation where that happened to me is I really wanted to get there was a vice president opportunity for global aspirin in the cardiovascular space, global cardiovascular aspirin. And I really wanted the role, and I had sort of indicated to my line management that I thought this would be a great opportunity for me. And I was having the conversations about how do I become candidate ready so I will be considered for it. And that's language I use a lot, rather than, how do I get promoted? It's like, how do I just get ready? What's the skills that I need? Because it gives people an easier framework to talk to you about your development. And they hired somebody outside of the organization. And in fact, I was on the interview panel for that role. And I didn't get the job. I wasn't interviewed for it even. They decided to hire from outside. And I was incredibly disappointed. But what I did is, I should have raised my hand to the person that was the hiring manager, and I didn't. I thought my management was going to help me. So it was an error on my side a little bit. But the other thing I did is I was still on the international team as the US representative, having to work with this new person that was hired. And I had actually had reservations about that person. But what I did is I eventually went to the SVP, the hiring manager, and we were on an international retreat on this project. And I asked to have breakfast with that person. And I sat down with them and I said, once I'd got over my own hurt, I just said, look, I just really want to understand why I wasn't picked and what it was that you saw that meant that you needed to go outside of the organization versus pick somebody inside the organization. And I'm asking these questions because I want to know how I can improve and do better. And the hiring manager had a very frank conversation with me and said, gave me some such valuable feedback at the time. The feedback was, you're a very collaborative person. And because of that, I don't have a clear understanding of what you bring to the table versus what your team brings to the table.
That's so, first of all, like it takes a bit of courage to have those direct conversations and ask for the hard feedback. And I have to say, it obviously worked. I mean, today you're the CEO of Southern California Reproductive Center. So maybe let's turn a bit to, this space today, because again, the fertility space, I don't know if, so I hear things, I read things about, I don't know if fertility issues have always been this prevalent, but there certainly is a lot of investment going on in this space. We're reading things about not enough babies, in terms of just the population that is happening. We're seeing fewer children being born. And I have to imagine that it's very rewarding to be helping people who really do want to have children to have that experience. So in your today role, being CEO of a large and growing practice with lots of complexity of innovation, staffing, burnout, the things that you mentioned, as well as having investors that you're working with. How do you balance all of these things? Where is sort of your true north in terms of what's important to you in your leadership role as CEO today?
That's a great question, because you're right. The industry is exploding, and just for a little bit of background, some of the reason that it is exploding is because women are choosing to have their children at a later age. They're balancing a lot more of career opportunities with family obligations, and as you may be aware, your fertility ability declines quite significantly in your 30s. You're getting closer to your perimenopause era. So, if you haven't either saved your eggs at a younger age, which is a big growth area for fertility preservation, it's best to try and get your eggs saved in your 20s. The earlier they are, the healthier and the better they are. But if you've waited until you're in your mid-30s to decide to have your family, for whatever reasons, whether it's to do with your career, whether it's to do with other personal situations, your fertility success is going to decline. And so therefore being able to help these often very high-powered couples, or people that have just had to, taken a long time to find the right partner for themselves, or have wanted to establish themselves to be able to bring up their children in a more affluent environment. And then they suddenly find, they're trying for a year and they can't have children. So then they seek help. So it's amazing to be able to do that. But you're right, it's also in my clinic, we have 6 physician partners, and we also have a PE firm that's an investor here. And that change happened from a pure private practice to an investor-led practice at the end of 2019, a month before the pandemic.
Yeah.
So managing multiple stakeholders can be challenging. And I use that language advisedly, because even though it has changed its infrastructure, the physicians are incredibly important to how a clinic is run. And so my true north is probably that collaboration style that I talked about that got me into trouble in the past, but has also really, really helped me in many, many circumstances to be what I think is an appropriate leader. And it's about making sure that everybody that's at the table understands what the situations are, and has a voice in creating that path forward at whatever level they are in the organization. If your colleagues, your staff, your employees, your senior leaders have a stake in a project, then make sure that everyone understands what their stake is and what the bigger stakes are of the project, and engage them as you can appropriately in the path forward. And that has always served me well, and it serves me well here, because that way the physicians are always engaged, the clinical staff are always engaged, the physician and ownership of the company is involved. And then I can also engage with the PE firm, or with the line management that comes up to, there's a holding company that we feed into, and there's lots of us across the country that are in women's health. Is making sure that all the stakeholders understand what the situation is, and engaging them at the right time, and being clear about what you need from them in that engagement. So the collaborative approach, I think, helps everybody have a voice at the table. And then, part of my role is to be able to summarize all those disparate points of view, to be able to help everyone understand what might or might not work, and what the consensus is, to make sure that even if somebody has a disparate point of view, they can be brought on board with the consensus because it makes sense.
Well, it's just so interesting to hear how just, your background, and, how the learnings from just the various experiences that you've had, how that is serving you well in what is a complex environment. Maybe one more question, Michaela, about this particular space. If you can just look into the crystal ball, there's so much activity here. What is sort of the breakthrough innovations that you're excited about beyond the reward of helping so many with fertility? What are some of the breakthroughs that you're looking forward to?
I think It's less about the looking forward, but some of the breakthroughs that have happened in the more recent past that may not be used as much as they could be used. So, for example, genetic testing. My clinic leans on that very, very heavily, but it is still an emerging science, and it's got better and better and better. So, genetic testing of making sure that you are testing for the best embryos to be implanted really, really elevates, can double the success rate of an IVF cycle when you genetically test the embryos versus don't test them. So that's very, very exciting. I think the advancements in frozen technology of being able to, use different freeze techniques today versus just 10 years ago is helping materials be stored for even longer and even safer, because you have to defrost them at some point in order to implant them. I think the advancements in the art reproductive technologies, the lab that actually does the fertilization is really incredible. And that's where the magic all happens, to make sure that those embryos the eggs are stored safely, that they're fertilized safely, that they're then stored safely so that they can be reimplanted into a person's womb and be able to grow to give birth to a child.
Well, that is a lot of innovation and different aspects of medicine. So thank you for sharing that. Michaela, as we close out on this Inspiring Women conversation, as you think about just your own professional journey and success as a CEO, what might be some last closing words of wisdom that you might share with the audience we have?
One of the things about my journey that I think is beneficial for where I am today is a willingness to learn. So I've done many different categories, many different businesses, whether it's B2C, B2B, B2 professional, wholesale type businesses. The fundamentals of business don't really change that much, but the willingness to learn and to really immerse yourself in your category so that you can understand the nuances really make the difference in helping you be able to come up with strategic solutions that are truly fit the category or the business group that you're in. So that willingness to learn is really important. I think having a fundamental belief in yourself is important, because when you believe in yourself, I think you're willing to step back and listen to others. I don't ever think that I'm the smartest person at the table. Being in multiple different categories gives me, probably an inch worth of knowledge in the category that I'm in, but a mile's worth of experience of listening and understanding others. And, I've really, really focused on trying to bring the best out in others. I just know that there's going to be somebody that's in my organization or in the room that I'm in the room of at that moment that knows more than I, and that will be able to help us solve that problem. So if I can articulate that problem in a real clear way to help others bring their best self to the table, as an organization or as a group or as even a problem that you're trying to solve, you'll get to a better solution. So if you're comfortable with yourself of what you bring to that organization, you can bring the best out in others. I think that's really important. And I think knowing what you want to achieve in the next 5+ years helps you frame your own career journey. So it becomes about, what do I have to learn and what do I have to gain in order to achieve my goal that I'm looking at for the next 5 or 10 years versus, that hurry up and what will I get in the next 12 months. So having a longer term perspective of what the benefit is to you and your organization, I think helps you become more valuable to others.
Well, that is just a lot of fantastic advice, and I really appreciate the guidance. This has been an excellent Inspiring Women conversation. I've been speaking with Michaela Griggs, and Michaela, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
This has been an episode of Inspiring Women with Laurie McGraw. Please subscribe, rate, and review. We are produced by Kate Cruz at Executive Podcast Solutions. More episodes can be found on inspiringwomen.show. I am Laurie McGraw, and thank you for listening.